Hi there, I'm Scott Winfield, the host of Victorian Opera's podcast, The Art of Opera. For the launch of the company's season 2018, I'll be taking you behind the scenes with Artistic Director Richard Mills as we discuss the season ahead together. Richard, firstly, congratulations on the season ahead.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's a team effort.
Now, this marks your 6th year at the helm of the company. How have you approached this season?
We're going to investigate some of the great classics, one of which has never been seen in Australia before. For the last 4 years, the company's concentrated on Bellini. The extension of that is Rossini, as we'll see. An essential part of the continuum of bel canto, which is the basis of all singing, and the basis of all opera. We have great works, an incredible variety of collaborations, not only with venues, but with various performance partners, which we'll explore later, and work which appeals, I think, to a wide demographic. That is, people who are interested in opera, traditional or experimental, work for children, work for young adults, and work for the regions. So it's very much speaking to and for the Melbourne and Victorian community, which is what we are funded to do.
The season theme this year will be encounters. How did you decide on that?
It's always interesting to see the way a season evolves. Sometimes there are immediate correspondences in the works which present themselves as possibilities. Sometimes more recherche and less difficult to define characteristics and commonalities. This year, the notion of encounter emerged from the ideas of desire and destiny, which are germane to the themes of pretty well all the operas we're doing. Sometimes seen through a more light-hearted lens in the case of The Magic Pudding or Hansel and Gretel. Sometimes in a more fatalistic, dark view of the world, as in Pelleas and Melisande, and also in William Tell. So the notion of encounter with destiny and desire reflects a commonality, a thematic commonality, if you like, of all the repertoire we're giving next year.
Let's focus on the first main stage production of the year. Victorian Opera returns to the Palais Theatre for the Australian premiere of Rossini's William Tell. It's quite a coup for the company, really. This was Rossini's final opera. Why is it considered such a masterpiece?
Well, it's a problematic opera. Yes, it is a masterpiece because it's a piece by a master. And it's a serious theme, which is not probably what your average opera punter associates with Rossini, though he did write quite a few serious operas. He wrote an opera about Moses, an opera about Othello, for example. So he does have a gift for drama, for serious drama, which of course was immensely influential on Donizetti and of course subsequently Verdi. It's a piece which has never had, Guillaume Tell has never been done in Australia.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it needs a lot of tenors for a start, and tenors of a particular kind. For example, in the very first scene, Ruodi has to sing about 4 or 5 high Cs, one after the other, and not unbalance the ensemble by screeching. So that in itself is a challenge, to find the right vocal quality that has a mellifluous, well-produced high C that can balance with the rest of the ensemble. And of course the role of Arnold is very, very taxing indeed. But also the title role, Guillaume or William, is a very complex, long and demanding role. And for that we are very lucky to be able to bring a troupe of really wonderful singers. Firstly, starting with Jean-Francois Lapointe, who's made this role his own. He gave legendary performances of it in Geneva. Interestingly enough, he's also one of the finest gauloids in the world, though we don't have him in Pelleas and Melisande. But he's a wonderful French singer with an incredible gift for the colours and the energy of the French language. So that'll be a marvellous exemplum for all of us in the room to listen to this masterful French singing. And he's also, I think, a person of considerable intellect and also somebody who likes to explore repertoire off the beaten track. If you look at the kind of work he does, he's obviously not interested in just being a star baritone. The man is a thinker and a musical thinker and a dramatic thinker, and I'm very much looking forward to this collaboration.
Well, it will be wonderful to welcome him to the company.
Absolutely. And joining him
Yes.
will be Gisela Stille, who's one of the absolute staple members of the ensemble in the Royal Danish Opera in Copenhagen. She doesn't travel much, she sings mainly in Copenhagen, but she sings all the major soprano roles. And the role of Mathilde it's an interesting role. It needs a dramatic coloratura. It needs someone with enormous heft, but also the ability to have great and expressive agility in their singing. And Gisela has all those qualities. The interesting thing about Guillaume Tell is, of course, it's a new production.
Yes.
And by my dear, wonderful colleague, Rodula Gaetanu, who of course works regularly at the Royal Opera House, Lisbon, and God knows where else. She's one of the really up-and-coming world directors of opera, and she's been to Australia. She directed The Uninhabited Island at the last...
Hope Upper Road.
Indeed. And remounted the Covent Garden's Cap and Peg for Opera Australia most recently. But she's a wonderful colleague and has a particular interest in this piece. So we won't be seeing a William Tell full of cuckoo clocks and cows or cowbells and chocolates and all the other associated Swiss paraphernalia. But we'll be seeing one that's based on a fairly gritty political reality, because fundamentally it's an opera about the nature of political repression, the price of freedom, and the difficulties between reconciling, I guess, one's civic duty to fight for what is right and the very real and tender exigencies of family and friends. And I guess it's when these worlds collide, when someone close to the family is murdered brutally, that the real kind of complex web of emotions suddenly explode, and we have this wonderful operatic exploration of or encounter with desire and destiny.
The opera is perhaps best well known for its iconic overture.
Yep.
What's the rest of the work like musically?
The Lone Ranger. Tonto. I'm old enough to remember Tonto on the radio. Was it Tonto on Hi Ho Silver? That's right, that was the horse's name. A beautiful name for a horse, I think. Anyway, the rest of the music is quite wonderful. It's of a uniformly really high quality. The only trouble is, of course, there's so much of it. And there's Rossini's famous comment. Someone said, "Oh, maestro, I went to William Tell last night." He said, "What, all of it?" It was never intended to be performed in its absolute entirety. Because of the Paris opera of the day, scenography, dramaturgy was decided by committees. Can you imagine? What a nightmare. Particularly if you're a working composer. It'd be like working in film today. You'd have an editor and a director, everybody putting their oar in. So Rossini wrote much more than was needed. So whatever you do to it, it needs cutting. It needs what we call in the trade a blue pencil. There's a lot of superfluous material in the first act. There's a lot of dancing and flower hoopla for the chorus, which we can really do without, and we do. That's all gone, and we cut to the chase, which is really, it's a story of desire and destiny, and an encounter with political forces and the effect they have on a small agrarian rural society.
Wonderful. Well, I think it really will be one of the highlights of the season, particularly given that it is the Australian premiere, which is quite incredible given that it is a Rossini opera.
138 years old or something.
Something similar to that.
Yeah.
In September, the company says goodbye to Bellini following our concert series. How did you decide on the Capulets and the Montagues?
Well, it was either that or Beatrice di Tenda. I think Capuletti Montecchi has slightly more interesting music, though there's some wonderful things in Beatrice di Tenda. Of course, we've done already Norma, I Puritani and La Sonnambula. So really, it was also as a vehicle for our darling Jessica Pratt, who returns, and for also the wonderful Australian mezzo, Caitlin Hulcup, who's coming back to sing the pants role. I almost think that's the most unfortunate term.
Yes.
The pants role of Romeo, yes. And it has wonderfully atmospheric music, great melodic invention, tremendous rhythmic drive in the choruses and the scenographic music. The interesting thing about this performance is that we'll welcome our dear friends, the Tasmanian Symphony.
Yes, absolutely.
To come and play for us in Melbourne. They're going to do a concert here in their own right under their chief guest conductor, Johannes Fritsch, a dear colleague of many years, and they're also going to play for us with Romeo and Juliet. And it's absolutely germane to their 2018 season, which their artistic administrator, Simon Rogers, has built around the Shakespearean notions.
Yes.
So later in the year, we're collaborating with them and their wonderful chief conductor, and also a great friend, Marco Letogna, on Romeo et Juliette of Gounod, with a wonderful international cast. So that'll be a great excuse for all the people in Melbourne who love opera to go to Hobart for the weekend.
Absolutely.
As well as all the people in Hobart who love opera
to fly up
come to Melbourne. Yes.
It's a great coup for everyone. Now, speaking of Jessica Pratt and Caitlin Hallcup, why is this such a coup for Melbourne audiences to hear them singing Bellini's music?
I don't think Caitlin sung in Melbourne. I can't believe that's true. I first met Caitlin when she was a young artist at West Australian Opera when I was artistic director there. And she's a wonderful viola player, by the way. And it's interesting.
So, great musical intelligence.
Oh yeah, terrific musician. And the viola has basically the same compass as the mezzo voice. So she inhabits that colour world by habit. And she's an absolutely wonderful singer. I mean, she's been member of the ensemble of the Vienna Staatsoper. I mean, she's now has a considerable European career, encompassing Glyndebourne and God knows where else. She's on the front cover of Opera magazine. And from those dizzy heights, she's descending to Melbourne to sing in our concert opera. And I hope also will be the beginning of a series of collaborations with Caitlin, because she's one of my very favourite artists. Interestingly enough, we should thank Professor Jane Davidson in the University of Melbourne also, because Caitlin is a very intelligent person. She's doing a doctorate at the University of Melbourne, and she'll be here in August working on that doctorate with Jane, and so it's fortuitous that she's also available to sing for us.
Wonderful. Now, following on from the Capulets and the Montagues, Melbourne audiences will have a rare chance to hear Debussy's only opera, Pelleas and Melisande. Tell us about the work.
Well, Pelleas and Melisande is a very, it's very idiosyncratic. It's unique, really, if I could use that word, in its full meaning in the literature of opera. It's like Fidelio. It's like one opera composer. And it's unique because of its dramaturgy and the way it sets text. It's a kind of deliquescent reality, if I could put it that way. It dissolves the distinctions between what is real and perhaps what is imagined. In fact, what is real becomes what is imagined, if I could put it that way. And in the superficial naturalism of it, and it does have a superficial naturalism. I mean, the characters Golode, Arkel, Pelleas and Melisande, Geneviève, they don't say anything that you probably couldn't imagine them saying in the normal flux of existence. I mean, the text is fundamentally, except with a few snips, based on Maurice Maeterlinck's play of the same name. Interesting, Maeterlinck fell out with Debussy, probably over his casting of Mary Garden, the soprano in the principal role. They almost came to blows over it, but I think there might have been slightly more to that, but we won't go there. But in the end, Maeterlinck had the graciousness to admit Debussy was right. So it has this patina of naturalism, but underneath that there are all these unfathomable undercurrents, and it takes place framed by this music that simply moves in ostensibly the freest, most spontaneous way with the currents of emotion and drama which animate the plot. But of course, as in anything by Debussy, it's highly organised, but not in an obvious way. The dramatic structures are very, very carefully organised.
A very strong cast leads a production with Siobhan Stagg and Angus Wood performing the title roles. Why is this such a great coupling?
Ah, well, Siobhan's never sung an opera in Melbourne, to my knowledge. And she's now fest at the Berliner Staatsoper. She's sung all sorts of important roles there, including Sophie and der Rosenkavalier. She's singing, I don't know whether I'm supposed to say this, but I will. She's singing Pamina at Covent Garden. She has now a very important developing career, and it's wonderful to welcome her home to sing this role. It's a role she's wanted to do, so it helps her career, which is one of the things that I think it's important for your home company to do. Angus is a very seasoned Pelleas. He first sung the role when he was an ensemble member at Opera Australia under the enlightened guidance of Moffat Oxenbould in those years, and he's gone on from strength to strength, and he's a veteran in the role, so he'll bring a great experience to it. And the other interesting thing is that I've taken a risk, but I think a very well calculated risk, because I have absolute faith in our Golod, Samuel Dundas, who will also be making a role debut, who's another one of our young artists who's developing into a terrific singer.
And who delivered a brilliant performance in Victorian Opera's Cunning Little Vixen earlier this year.
Absolutely, and we have David Parkin come and sing Arkel, and the wonderful Leanne Keegan as Geneviève. A wonderful singer, and a real treasure to have in Melbourne.
And a brilliant actress as well.
Ah, yes.
Now, Victorian Opera's artistic associate and executive producer Elizabeth Hill will be directing the production, with a current Victorian Opera developing artist, Candice McAllister, designing the sets and costumes. What's the vision for the production?
Well, the interesting thing, Debussy hated being called an impressionist, but I suppose the production responds to the question, why impressionism? And you know, in some ways it's a very simple thing. The invention of the camera. People didn't take snapshots until the second half of the 19th century. And when you had painters painting in this hyper-realistic style before, it was suddenly rendered obsolete by the evolution of photography. So the visual arts had to find a new vision, a new way of depicting reality. And this is what essentially Impressionism is. It delves behind the real, which is now rendered redundant through photography, and explores what is behind the real, the impressions, if you like, particularly of light. And so I think Candice and Libby have used that as their starting point. So there's absolutely nothing real. There's no practical objects. Of course there's a bed, there has to be for the last act, but there's not a lot of stuff on stage, as there often is in Pelleas. There's all the accoutrements of castles and apartments and armour and all of this stuff. And there's none of that. It's a very fluid reality, deliquescent, I think that word comes to mind. It is not real. It explores the horizon between the real and the imagined, and the real behind the real, if you like, which is the most important thing, and fundamentally what's opera is about. I mean, you don't go to an opera to see someone do the washing up. No. It's about an exploration of the landscape of the emotions, and this is a particular relevance, I think, as the key concept behind their approach to this production. They've developed a scenic landscape of the emotions, which I think will read very, very simply, but I believe very effectively from what I've seen. And Candice submitted a series of drawings, and I said, yep, I think from the work you've done on this, you absolutely deserve an opportunity to take this to a final vision. Very talented and quite wonderful young lady. And also Elizabeth Hill has a fabulous eye for placing people on stage and for the essentiality of dramatic structure. And we're very, very lucky to have these people on staff.
You'll be conducting this production. Who will be your orchestra?
We're very, very lucky to begin the first collaboration with the Australian National Academy of Music. And I thank their artistic director, Nick Deutsch, so much for being on board with this. A fabulous institution, great teachers, and just doing an outstanding job in educating the elite of Australian musicians. And it will provide an orchestra of really wonderful standard, because the student cohort at ANAM is of a very, very high quality indeed. I mean, there's seriously professional quality of young people who are keen as mustard to learn. So it'll be a great joy to guide them through mastering the subtleties of Debussy, and particularly the subtleties of this score, which demand great command of the French style. And the interesting thing, people make the mistake about the French style, particularly the Impressionist style of I think it comes in away from Gieseking, the way Gieseking used to play the preludes, lots of pedal, but in fact, and wash of sound. But in fact, the essence of the French style is in the minutiae of the detail. If you look at the number of different ways Debussy suggests to begin, or requests that you begin a note, for example, in the first 10 pages of Pelleas, I mean, it's extraordinary education to the detail that's involved. And the effects of French music are achieved through punctilious observation of the detail and internal balance. And that demands, of course, great mastery of dynamic, the ability to modulate tone carefully through the whole range of an instrument and all the rest of it. So they're the things we'll be working on and exploring, and hopefully produce a wonderful orchestral accompaniment for this lovely cast, which I'm so looking forward to. And they're all Aussies, which is thrilling as well.
Now, the final main stage production in Victorian Opera's 2018 season also features an incredibly strong female creative team. What's the work and who's involved?
Lorelei.
Yes.
Yes, das Lorelei, or die Lorelei, rather, I should say. The Lorelei, yes. Well, the Lorelei is a goddess, a three-faced goddess with Ali McGregor, Dimity Shepherd, and Antoinette Halloran, our three sirens, who will each inhabit a different part of the eternal feminine, so to speak. Das ewig Weibliche, yes. And they'll be tempting the sailors on the rock. They like their men like they like their whiskey on the rocks.
Very good. Now, the production marks Victorian Opera's 20th new Australian work, which I think is an incredible achievement, particularly given the company will be marking its 13th season in 2008. In 2018, I should say, rather. One of the other big celebrations next year will be the 100th anniversary of Norman Lindsay's classic storybook, The Magic Pudding. Victorian Opera is remounting the production the company first staged in 2013.
That's right.
What do you love about the work?
Well, it's charming. It's by Calvin Bowman, who I think is one of our greatest songwriters. Calvin has the same sort of songwriting gift as Samuel Barber, this absolutely effortless and beautiful lyricism and wonderful feeling for setting particularly English text. It's quite remarkable. He's a great songwriter. And he brought all those qualities, as I knew he would, to setting Anna Goldsworthy's delightful libretto for The Magic Pudding. And we mentored this collaboration very carefully, and we got a very good work out of it, which went all around rural Victoria in 2013.
As it will next year as well.
Yep. And enjoy a season in town. An audience loved it, and part of the brief for the commission was to provide a vehicle for the children's and community choruses in each town to join in the singing, which they'll do.
Wonderful. Well, following that, children and families in Melbourne will see another adaptation of a classic tale. Why is Engelbert Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel so enduring?
Well, I mean, both, actually it's interesting, both fairy stories have to do with eating. Albert the Magic Pudding.
Delicious, never-ending fun.
Yeah, that's right. Albert the Magic Pudding is eternally replenished, and the witch's house is full of gingerbread, and they end up cooking the witch. Fundamental childlike infatuation with eating, I think. Well,
is this influencing your programming?
Well, no, not directly. But Hansel and Gretel is a wonderful opera. It's so sophisticated and yet so simple. Superficially, it's so simple. Try playing the opera in a rehearsal without practicing. You'll get a very, very nasty shock.
Yes.
It's so beautifully realised harmonically. It's exquisite. And although we've cut it down to about an hour, because we have to adapt it to the attention spans of a younger audience. It's still a thing of great wonder, I think, Hansel and Gretel. And it always reveals new beauties when you come to work on it again.
I think one of the great strengths of the season ahead is its accessibility. From 2018 forward, all C Reserve tickets to Victorian Opera productions will be $35.
$35? Heavens! That is an absolute bargain.
Absolutely, Richard.
And we do take our role to be the state company and to be accessible to all Victorians very seriously. That's a steal.
A range of subscription packages are available for next year at current. Head to victorianopera.com.au. Remember, the more you see, the more you save. I think one of the great new initiatives from Victorian Opera next year as well for opera diehards aged 30 and under is an unlimited season pass. So for $100, you have access to every performance in the season. So it's a wonderful opportunity for young audiences to really get in there and see everything that they can for only $100, so it's quite a fantastic opportunity. So if you've never been to the opera before, looking for a gift or a great night out, head to victorianopera.com.au and there are plenty of fantastic opportunities for you. Richard, thank you again and congratulations on the company's season. It's a wonderful season ahead.
Thank you, Scott. Please come and join us.
We'll see you at the theatre.
Bye.